Reddit, what was a simple gesture from a stranger or acquaintance that made all the difference? A few years ago, I was going through a very tough time. In just a few short months, I lost 2 dogs, my grandpa, my dad, my job, and my wife to divorce. My son was still a tiny thing. One night, I was driving with my son on about a 12-hour trip. He got sick and was throwing up. Luckily, a Target was off the exit I took. It was pouring rain. Disheveled me gets my son inside Target. I'm soaking wet. He is crying and vomiting. Any parent knows how seeing your child like this just guts you, and I'm frantically searching for medicine while trying to calm him down. It was at this moment everything just hit me. Here I am, this grown man, with a sick child, in a strange Target, and I just broke down and cried. I'm pushing my son around just sobbing. It was soon that this elderly man, maybe 65, just comes up to me and talks to me. I just unload my story on this guy. He sat there with me just listening. He got both my son and me to stop crying, even making us both laugh a little. Once I was calmed, he just put his hand on my shoulder and said, "It'll be all right, son, it always gets better. I promise." That man has no idea how profoundly he impacted me with his time and those simple words. My brother went to his counselor at school to tell her he wouldn't be attending school next year. My aunt wasn't going to take us in anymore. Financial problems from my parents in Mexico. A lady overheard him and offered him to stay with her. She found out about me and still took us in. She became our foster mom for a few years, to which I'm eternally grateful. Edit. I see some people arguing whether this is simple or not. To me, OS simple because it was with no strings attached. The opposite of my own aunt. My aunt did take us in, but she charged my parents half of everything. They were 2 adults and 2 girls. It got ridiculous when they started to ask for half the phone bill. They were also getting food stamps, but we weren't allowed to eat anything but the crap food my aunt made. So in short, this stranger took us in and made it simpler. Everyone has different experiences in life and views things differently. I was longboarding one night and hit some broken concrete. The board stopped, but I didn't. I knew to roll with the fall, but I landed on my shoulder really hard. I didn't think anything was really wrong with me, just figured I was going to hurt because my 200 pounds ass just flung itself violently onto cement. I walked to a nearby liquor store parking lot to check myself in the light, and saw a lady leave the store and get in her car. She begins to pull out of the lot, sees me, and pulls back into the spot. As she gets out of the car, she says, "Is your shoulder dislocated?" I tell her I don't know and explain what just happened. She tells me to stand straight and let my arms hang down at my side, looks me over and says, "Yup, that's out. Don't move." And with one quick jerk twist, I don't really know what she did, my shoulder was back in its proper place. She got in her car without another word and drove off. I was barely able to say thank you before she closed her car door. I went to a doctor the next day because my mom berated me into it, and they told me the lady did a great job and probably saved me from tearing something. I couldn't sleep the evening after my brother's funeral. I went to the cemetery in my PJs and sat next to the burial site. There was no headstone yet, in a daze. This old man walked up and sat next to me early the next morning. It was hard for him to lower himself into a sitting position on the ground, but he did. He didn't say anything, he just put his arm around my shoulders. I broke down and cried harder than I've ever cried before, and he just held me. After I had calmed down, he told me that he wanted to show me his wife's grave. He started talking to her like she was standing in front of us. He told her that my brother is new to heaven and that he'd appreciate it if she'd help him get settled in. I don't know exactly why, but it brought me so much peace. He was completely confident that his wife could hear him, which made me confident, and the idea of my brother having someone to take care of him was such a huge burden off of my chest. He walked me to my car and told me that he'll check on my brother every morning when he visits his wife. I never saw him again, but I will never ever forget him. I don't think I would have had the strength to walk away from the cemetery without his support. When I was 18 and waiting tables, this super well-dressed, gorgeous woman I was serving said to me at the end of her meal, "Hey, you're going to think I'm crazy, but you have the most beautiful aura." I had such low self-esteem at 18, so this really took me off guard. She then asked what I wanted to do after I finished school. I told her I wanted to write or edit for magazines, and she said, "I can tell you are an incredible person. I have no doubt you will go on to do all those great things and more." I talked with her and her husband for 10 more minutes after that, and they were the most positive, uplifting people. And personally, I don't even buy into the aura stuff, but she had such an admirable personality and style, so her kindness and affirmation meant so much to me. So, did you become what you wanted to be? This happened only 2 years ago, but it seems like it's been so much longer than that. Still in college and majoring in both marketing and writing. I'm 20 now, but I'm on the right track to getting there. My oldest son, 4 years old, was having a meltdown and pushed over a recycle bin in a theme park, spilling out a bunch of empty bottles and whatnot. Embarrassed in front of a ton of people, my wife and I were faced with a dilemma: pick up the mess to try to save face and limit the embarrassment, or hold our ground and make him clean up the mess he made in anger. We decided to hold our ground, and yes, it caused even more of a commotion. After a while, he finally came to his senses and started cleaning up the mess, and we told him we would help if he started cleaning up first. Mess cleaned, and on we went. About 10 minutes later, another family comes up to us, and the wife says something to the effect of, "I saw what happened, and I want to affirm you for how you handled things. You were both great parents in that situation, and I admire that." Talk about a 10-second statement from a stranger that can turn around a sour mood. I got pregnant in high school. Eventually, all my teachers were made aware because I was really sick for a while. One of my teachers wrote me a little card offering baby clothes and toys, other items. She had just had a baby, and her help and an ear if I ever needed it. I took all of the things she offered, and she became really like a close friend to me during that time. I'll never forget it, and I miss her now that I've moved out of state. During Employee Appreciation Week at the university I work at, we had an activity where you could write anonymous thank you notes to coworkers for their efforts. I received one in my mailbox that read, "Thank you for being you. Your cheerful, friendly, open, and kind way is inspiring. I'm so glad you are a part of this community." It was so kind and unexpected. I teared up a bit. It hangs on my wall next to my desk. It makes me smile whenever I see it. Some backstory: my 8-year-old dog died unexpectedly from bone cancer back in January. I didn't leave my bedroom for a week and cried all day and night. Unfortunately, I had just started running a craft market, and the first one was the next week. The last thing I wanted to do was go out anywhere. So that entire day I had to put on a fake smile and have the most mundane small talk with every single vendor. At one point I couldn't take it anymore, so I went in a porta potty and just cried. When I finished crying, I had to hand out tax forms to the vendors. I walked over to one of my food vendors and handed him a form. He wordlessly handed me a Philly cheesesteak that he had already put in a to-go box. I had never spoken more than a couple sentences to the guy and barely knew his name. I figured he gave me the food because I was the owner. The previous owners of the event had food vendors give them free food before too. I kept thinking about it, and I deeply appreciated the act of kindness while I was mentally at my lowest. He was also the only vendor that day that didn't try to have a meaningless conversation with me. The rest of the day I thought about it. The next month at my festival, he struck up a conversation about a necklace he saw that I had made and posted on Facebook. A week later we were dating, and I found out that he gave me the free food because he liked me but froze up and couldn't say anything to me that day. A small act of kindness from a total stranger at the time changed my mood that day and changed my life drastically. We've been together 7 months and live together now. I'm very sure that I'm gonna marry him. As a kid, my home life was less than stellar. I had spent time in foster care, and my mom was an abusive bipolar alcoholic. Good times. She met my stepdad when I was 9, and we moved to his farm. We were poor but had our basic needs covered. My self-esteem was low. My parents chain smoked, so I smelled like smoke all the time. I wore second-hand clothes and no-name brands. We had a party at school in the 5th grade where a few parents volunteered. The day after the party, a girl in my class told me that her mom said I was going to be beautiful when I grew up. That made me feel good. I went to the 10-year class reunion and ran into that girl. She told me that her mom was right all those years ago. I don't think I'm beautiful. Pretty, maybe, but that night I felt beautiful. When you're beat down as a kid, hearing something nice just feels amazing. When I was a kid, we didn't have a lot of money, so we often shopped at thrift stores. What I loved about that was that you could get 10 books for $1, so I would plant myself in front of the book section and make piles of which one I wanted to get, and then decided after I'd gone through them all. One day an older lady saw me sitting with my piles and asked if I liked to read. I told her I did and showed her a few of the books I found that I liked. She smiled and then pulled $1 out of her purse, handed it to me and said, "Promise me that you'll keep reading." I was so happy and immediately stood up and said that I would. She smiled and walked away, and I went back to my piles able to pick out an extra 10 books to take home. It was just a small act of kindness for her, but for me, having a random stranger encourage my love of reading and making me promise to never stop definitely had a lot to do with my continued love of reading. This was probably about 20 years or so ago, but I still think of her whenever I buy a new book. Do you have a similar story? Leave a comment and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this one.